Okay, so and break inflation up. So let's start with the cause of inflation. Well, let's start with what inflation is. Inflation is a period of or a process of sustained rising prices. So when we want to think about inflation, the best way of thinking about it is as the restaurant economy. Why might imagine the economy was a restaurant? Why would it increase its prices? And there are basically two reasons. Firstly, what might be happening is we might have rapidly rising aggregate demand. Yes, the demand's rising so fast in the economy, that means that going back to our restaurant, they've got loads and loads of customers. They don't know what to do with them. They've also got kind of shortages of staff who are demanding higher wages. They have no real choice other than to increase prices. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But basically, diagrammatically, what we're saying is that we start to approach full employment. We start running short of key factors of production. Businesses have too many customers. They've somehow got to allocate resources. Therefore, inflation starts to rise. So we have demand pull inflation. Secondly, why else might the restaurant increase its prices? Well, it might face some sort of sudden increase in its costs. So that could be something like a decrease in exchange rate, which increases import prices. It could be something like a commodity shock. So oil, of course. It could be something like an increase in the national minimum wage, something along those lines. And in that case, what happens is, if I replace this for a minute, if we look up here, then basically what's happening is, again, there's GDP, there's the price level, there's aggregate demand. An increase in costs means that suddenly, for a given level of GDP, is associated with a higher price level, a higher cost. Firms have to pass on that increase in costs to firms, and that causes both rising prices because the firm has to maintain its profit margins, and falling GDP, because we're cutting consumers' real incomes. So that's not going to, so that, which is fine. So basically we've got demand pull and cost push inflation. But what's sustaining inflation? What you really want to be doing is saying, well, what is it that's sustaining inflation? What is it that's really driving prices up? And the best way of seeing that is through the wage price spiral. So if here we have labour markets, and here we have product markets being where firms compete and prices set. Let's suppose, for example, that there's an increase in aggregate demand. Well, in labour markets, if there's high demand, what that means is that workers are in a strong position. It's very easy for them to ask for an increase in wages. Because demand rises, unemployment's low, you can't fire me, therefore I'll ask for a pay rise. And therefore that leads to an increase in firms' costs. But of course, if aggregate demand's high, it's very easy for firms to increase prices. They've got loads of customers. The restaurant has a waiting list until Christmas, and therefore it's very easy for them to increase prices. What that does, of course, is it increases the cost of living, for ordinary households. So therefore they can say, well, I want a pay rise. And at this point, we also have inflationary expectations. So inflation, so this is called the wage price spiral. It can be triggered by either an increase in aggregate demand, which starts demand pull inflation, or some sudden increase in costs, which creates cost push inflation. This is how inflation is sustained through the wage price spiral. But when you're talking about inflation, be really clear, why is it that businesses are increasing their prices?